Hi, and welcome to another tabletop tip of the day. I adjust my headphones here. Today I'd like to talk about GMing and GMs to you specifically. Are you hard on yourselves? I so I want to jump in here and just say that the art that's going by is not really pertaining to anything about GMing. It's just there to entertain your eyeballs and also to, I guess you could say, you know, this video is sponsored by Storn's Art. I am a professional artist. I am looking for work always. So if you've got a project, if you're a publisher, or if you need some private commissions, please check my website out at stornart.com. You can drop me an email at storn.cook@gmail.com. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you. One of the things I want to do is, I consider myself a fairly good GM, a very good GM, in fact. Critically am looking at this, and this might be a very egotistical thing to say, but I've played with lots of people in my lifetime, and I'm, one of the better GMs. There are certainly a handful who are better than I am, and I play with them often, so they humble me constantly. But I think I'm a fairly good GM, and I take a lot of pride in it, and I have a lot of passion for GMing. And so I think one of the things we should do is take a look at my strengths and some of my weaknesses. And I'm trying to be as honest with you as I possibly can. And I also want to put this disclaimer in here. Listen, GMing is hard, and what makes a great GM for one table might not be a great GM for another table. It depends on your players, it depends on the system, it depends on the genre, it depends on all these things coming together to make the perfect stew and get you the dish that you want, right? So some of the things that might be strengths that I have or weaknesses that I might have might work great for some players and totally drive other players crazy. Now, I happen to have a very diverse set of players, and so one of the things I have to do, and here's maybe one of my strengths, is I have to tap dance between the needs and wants of those players to walk that tightrope. And that comes from a lot of, we always joked in Sons of Cryos, the podcast that I was in many years ago. Pretty much every session ended with talk to your players. Yeah, it comes down to talking to your players a lot. So that's one of my GM strengths. I can talk to my players. Another one of my strengths is I think I come up with fairly interesting plot lines. I pride myself on that. I really spend a lot of time thinking about plot lines. I try to twist tropes and cliches a little bit. For example, one time I had an invading orc army, and to play with the misconceptions or to sort of upset the trope wagon a little bit. I made the orc army very much after the Mongols, which was 10 men to a squad, 10 squads to a company, highly organized, highly equipped, horse archers, highly disciplined. And when I introduced that to the players, it kind of blew their mind. And that was a really fun thing to do. I happened to be reading The Devil's Horseman at the time, and that really inspired me, which is about the Mongols, really inspired me to incorporate that into our Forgotten Realms game. So I avoided the trope, I avoided the cliche. It wasn't just a raging horde of barbaric orcs, right? So I think I'm pretty good at that. Another strength I have is I can draw, and I'm very good at finding images that support the game. I, look at Pinterest, I look at Facebook, I look at ArtStation, and I can find images. And I think images and good maps are really wonderful tools to get all the players on the same page and also create a sense of a space and create a sense of place, right? I'm fairly organized. One of the things that we do is we play virtually on Thursday nights. And when I was running Stone Top, there was a lot of playbooks that were open, and I had probably 10 tabs on my second monitor and another 5 tabs on my first monitor opened. And I could jump around those pretty good. After a while, I got pretty good at that. So I'm fairly organized. I write my adventures. I do my prep in a way that I can find the information that I'm looking for fairly quickly. Every once in a while, I can't remember something. Every once in a while, I have to take a little time out and say, "Hey, give me a second, guys. Let me look that up." But I'm pretty good at being organized. And lastly, I feel like my players seem to have a good time. And That's probably the most important thing, like, right? Because if they don't want to play with you, they're not going to play with you. So let's talk about some of my weaknesses as a GM. I have a tendency to just sort of present NPCs with a picture, and they're kind of flat. And I had a player call me out on this once, so I've spent a lot of effort trying to get. I took that really strongly to heart. So I spent a lot of time trying to think of ways of how that NPC can interact and their personality hit the table, right? And sometimes NPCs just happen, and they happen organically, and they become great NPCs. I have a bartender in the bar that my characters are in at the moment, who I have great affection for. I created an NPC who's like this retired sailor who's on the docks who paints ships because his knee got hit by a mast. A nod to Skyrim there. I was a soldier until I took an arrow to my knee. He took a mast to the knee. So he's become sort of like he knows what's going on the docks, and he's sort of this conduit for information and gossip, and I'm really happy with that. But I have a tendency to just like, here's an NPC, interact with it if you want to, don't interact with it if you don't want to, and they can come out a little flat. Um, Oddly, despite so here's my other weakness. Oddly, because I'm a visual problem solver, I'm a visual person. I draw for a living. I don't do great description. I don't give a lot of time at the table for description, and I think part of this is because of my nature and my background. I grew up in a German family, American German, but my grandmother came from Germany, and to be on time was to be 5 minutes early. And then I moved from the country. I was a country bumpkin, and I moved to New York City at 17 to go to school. And there in New York, either get out of the way or just don't waste people's time. So I don't want to waste people's time. It's really ingrained to me. I hate having my time wasted, and I hate wasting other people's time. Um, that's so when I think about descriptions and I see GMs go on and on and on, a paragraph, 2 paragraphs of description, I'm yawning. I already got the picture. It drives me crazy as a player. So I bring that, quick fire attitude to my GMing, and I sometimes cut off my descriptions too quickly, and don't give the players a sense of space or give them time to sort of settle in sometimes. Another weakness is I get bored by running combat. I just, after a while, after a few rounds, I get bored. Interestingly, um, running Conan, the 2D20 game from Modiphius, I haven't been bored once. Combat in that system is rocking, and I've really enjoyed it. So system matters, in my opinion. I think another weakness is I get trapped by the fiction. Now, this is more of a prep thing and isn't happening at the table. But sometimes I've got all these, forces. I tend to run very political games, and there's these machinations going on, and players are trying to figure things out, and I sort of just keep overloading them, and I tend to go, okay, it wouldn't be prudent for this NPC or this faction to do X and this faction to do Y. They're probably not going to do that, and all of a sudden I don't really have a good hook for some kind of interesting adventure for the players to go on, right? You have to, someone's got to make a mistake in those NPC factions for something to happen, or the players have to really drive the story. So if they're not driving the story, trying to come up with a way of, like, what I think Philip Marlowe said, when you don't know what to write, have the door get kicked open when a guy with a gun come in. I'm not so great at doing that. I tend to want to really kind of think through all the ramifications and kind of weigh all the pros and cons of what everybody is doing, not just the players, but the NPCs that are around them. I think that comes from very political games. Okay, I've talked about my weaknesses. I talked about my strengths. Um, and I have learned to try to compensate for my strengths, and I've learned to try to get better at them. I've been putting some effort into being more descriptive, but there's a balance here, and this is the art of GMing, and being so hard on yourself. And this has happened to me that I don't want to GM anymore, or have to put down the GMing role for a bit. Um, has really affected me, mentally, emotionally, physically, many times over the years. I really worry about whether I'm keeping my players happy. I really worry about if they're having a good time, and if I'm having a good time, I have to have a good time too. You have to have a good time. As a GM, you absolutely have to enjoy what you're running, or it is work. It's a slog. And this is a hobby. This is supposed to be fun. This is not supposed to be work. I don't get paid to do this. I know there's some people out there who are becoming professional GMs, and more power to them. And, that's awesome. But I think there's a real, what I've learned in the last few years, it's okay to have a bad session. And what I've learned is what happens after a bad session is usually the next week is a better session, because the players knew it was a bad session, the GM knew it was a bad session, things didn't get accomplished, the ball didn't get moved down the road, plot lines were sort of stale, things didn't happen, and the next week things tend to start moving forward, and sometimes even explode and become absolutely awe-inspiring and wonderful, and everybody's really, really engaged, right? So I think that's a really important thing. Now, I have been on a GMing streak for quite some time. Usually my games run about 12 to 15 episodes, and then I take a break. I let someone else in the group GMing. But just because the way real life has worked and stuff like that, I have been GMing a lot. I know that my Stone Top went 35 sessions. My Conan is probably approaching 20. Um, uh, so it's and I have no desire to stop. I am having a ball. I'm having fun. I'll make room if someone has a great idea and wants to come in and GM and do their thing. I'll certainly happily step aside. But right now, I totally feel like I've accepted my weaknesses, and I'm working on them, and that's okay. And I feel like things have been really good the last year and a half, 2 years. I feel like I've been putting out some really good games. Um, and one of the tools, and I have talked about this before, but I think it dovetails with strengths and weaknesses of GMs. And one of the tools is praises and wishes. This is something that came from Stone Top, and it's not called praises and wishes. It's something else, but I shortened it to praises and wishes. And basically, in the praise section, everyone goes around the table and says one thing that they liked about the game. I like that Eric put down his sword and comforted the orphan, or what Eric's character, I should say, whatever it is, or I sometimes as a GM will praise a player or two or something like that, and a lot of times I don't put anything down. Now, I also happen to be at the keyboard while I'm doing praises, and I have all my players listed out, and I write down what they say, so I can go back and look at it. And I think that affirmation is really key to keeping GMs engaged. So ask for that affirmation, and also the really cool thing about praises, even more than getting affirmation as a GM, because I've had like a player say, hey, I really appreciated that map you came up with, or whatever it was. That's great, love it. But it's even more amazing is when you see one player affirm another player and say, I really liked when you did this, or you opened up the scene for me to be involved, and I really was excited by that. And that is really cool, because sometimes when you're role playing, you're in the moment and you're in the character and you're reacting as that character, or as the GM you're reacting as that NPC, and you don't see how your stuff is affecting other people, especially in a virtual space. I mean, I have, a column of my players over to one side to my right that I can see their faces, but sometimes I'm looking up at my screen and I'm, thinking about things, or I'm talking or something, or I'm doing what I'm doing right now, and I tend to gesticulate and be crazy and whatnot, and I'm not looking at every one of their faces while I'm speaking, or look, when they're speaking, I might not always be looking at them. So to get that affirmation, especially from player to player, man, that just warms the cockles of my heart. I just that makes my week. Um, and then wishes is a really important tool for GMs because we go around the table and we say, a player said, I really like the subplot with the Countess. I want to explore that more. Okay, I just introduced the Countess as a throwaway character, but all of a sudden she's interesting to the player. Okay, I'll make sure to weave that in the next 1 to 3 episodes. And I also write these down too, and I can go back and refer to them. In fact, I actually put them up at the beginning of the document of where I'm starting to write my next adventure, or prep my next adventure. So wishes are like these giant flags from the players saying, I'm interested in X. Great. I had a player say, I'm really enjoying the Conan combat. I want to have some more Conan combat, and I'm like, okay, next session we're gonna have a a nice set piece combat piece. Let's do that. Or I'm really interested in exploring the politics of this region. I want to delve into that, and I want to make friends, and I want to throw my weight around. I actually want to run for council. I had a player recently say that I'm going to run for council. Awesome. So let's incorporate that. So I think one of the tips I have for being being less hard on yourself is listen to your players and give them what they want, maybe with a twist. Um, but that's a great way of learning how to be really confident going into a session that this is going to be a session that's going to be a good one. So yeah, that's my tabletop tip of my day. Don't be hard on yourself as a GM. You're learning, you're making mistakes. That's all great. Just be real upfront about it with your players, and lean on them and have fun. So I want to hear from you. Are you hard on yourself as a GM? What are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? Where do you deal and grapple with being a GM? I think that's really an interesting discussion. Please leave a comment under this video, and I will certainly read them, and maybe we can even develop another video out of that, and I can certainly learn from you guys. So, this is also a place to say, please, hit that subscribe button. Please hit that like button. Those things are really useful to me. And, and until next time, keep on keeping on.